The moment a mind awakens to the warp, it is already too late. Somewhere in the galaxy, a child screams as shadows crawl along the walls, whispering secrets in voices that do not belong to the living. The air grows cold, time stutters, and unseen eyes turn, vast and hungry, locking onto a single fragile soul. In the Imperium of Man, this awakening is not a gift. It is a death sentence written in invisible ink. A Psyker is not born powerful. They are born exposed. Their soul burns brighter than others in the immaterial sea known as the warp, and that brightness draws attention. Not the attention of allies or guardians, but of things that should never notice humanity at all. Predators older than stars. Intelligence is formed from nightmare and desire. To them, a Psyker is a flare in the darkness, an open wound in reality. At first, the signs are subtle. Dreams that feel too real. Voices heard just before sleep. Emotions that ripple outward, bending chance and coincidence. A door slams without wind. A candle ignites on its own. The Psyker does not understand what is happening, only that the world feels thinner, as if something is pressing against it from the other side. Then the dreams stop being dreams. In Imperial records, there are 1,000,000 ways a Psyker's life can end before it truly begins. Families turn on their own children in terror. Mobs burn them in the streets. Some are simply locked away, starved and forgotten. Because every untrained Psyker is a breach waiting to happen. A single moment of fear can tear open reality and invite the warp inside. When that happens, death would be mercy. Demons do not kill Psykers quickly. They infest them. They hollow them out. They peel away memory and identity, wearing the body like a mask while the soul is dragged screaming into the immaterial abyss. Entire cities have vanished because one frightened mind lost control for a heartbeat. Billions have died because of a single uncontrolled thought. And so the Imperium hunts its own. The black ships arrive without warning. Vast, silent monoliths drifting into orbit, their hulls etched with wards older than the Imperium itself. They are commanded by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, and their purpose is absolute. They come for Psykers, children, elders, nobles, beggars. It does not matter who they were before, only what they are now. Bound in chains of hexagrammic iron, blindfolded, drugged and terrified, the Psykers are loaded by the thousands. The ships are filled with screams that never reach the void. Inside there is no comfort, no explanation, only the certainty that something final is coming. For many, the journey itself is the end. Psykers die in transit from overload, possession, or sheer psychological collapse. Others beg for death when they begin to see through the walls of the ship into places the human mind was never meant to perceive. Faces press back from nothingness. Names echo that no one remembers teaching them. Those who survive are brought to terror. Here, beneath a sky choked with industry and devotion, the true fate of Psyker souls is decided. They are sorted, tested, and judged with ruthless efficiency. A rare few will be trained. Fewer still will survive that training. Because learning to touch the warp without being consumed by it requires more than strength. It requires a will capable of enduring endless terror without breaking. Most Psykers do not pass. They are taken below the Imperial Palace into chambers sealed by prayers and psychic wards. The air hums with restrained power, and at the center of it all sits the Emperor of Mankind, a corpse god bound to machinery, his mind stretched across the galaxy. The Imperium calls this sacrifice necessary. Every day, thousands of Psykers are fed into the Golden Throne. Their bodies are reduced to ash in moments. But it is not their flesh that matters. It is their souls. Each one is consumed, burned away to fuel the Astronomicon, the psychic lighthouse that allows humanity to travel the stars. They are not remembered. They are not mourned. Their names are erased. Their lives become seconds of illumination. Imagine what that means. To feel your soul being peeled apart, atom by atom, not by a blade but by a godlike presence that does not hate you, does not even acknowledge you. Your thoughts flare, then unravel. Memories of warmth, laughter, fear, all torn loose and dissolved into raw psychic energy. You do not die as a person, you are unmade as an idea. And this is considered the best possible outcome. Because for those not strong enough to be sacrificed cleanly, there are other uses. Psykers become living components, batteries wired into ships, weapons, and machines. Some are permanently bound into psychic choirs, screaming silently as their minds are forced into harmony until nothing remains but reflex and pain. Others are handed to the Inquisition. Inquisitorial interrogation of a psyker is not about extracting information. It is about stripping the soul bare. Memories are pulled out like exposed nerves. Secrets are ripped free along with sanity. When the process ends, the body may still breathe, but the person is gone, leaving behind a hollow shell that reacts to stimuli without understanding it. Yet even death does not mean escape. In the warp, the soul of a psyker shines long after the body is destroyed. Bright, delicious. Demons hunt these remnants relentlessly. A normal human soul dissolves quickly, scattered by the tides of unreality. A psyker's soul does not. It persists. It suffers. Some are torn apart in moments, devoured by warp predators that feast on emotion and memory. Others are claimed by darker powers, enslaved, reshaped, or imprisoned in eternal torment. Time has no meaning there. A single second of real space agony can stretch into centuries of suffering. There are whispers, fragmented, forbidden accounts of psyker souls that never fully die. Souls caught in the machinery of the Golden Throne, half consumed, endlessly burning but never extinguished. Minds locked in a state of perpetual dissolution, fueling the Imperium while experiencing every instant of their own erasure. If those whispers are true, then the Astronomicon is not just a beacon. It is a mass grave that screams. And still, psykers continue to be born. Every day, across 1,000,000 worlds, the warp does not care about imperial necessity or human survival. It presses closer, hungrier than ever. As the galaxy darkens, psykers are awakening in greater numbers with greater power and less control. The Imperium tightens its grip. More black ships, more sacrifices, more souls fed into the fire. Because without that light, humanity is blind. And without blind humanity, there is nothing left to protect them from what waits in the dark. Somewhere, right now, another child is hearing voices for the first time. Somewhere, a soul has just become visible to the warp. And somewhere beyond reality, something has noticed. What happens next is far worse than death. The Imperium insists this is the price of survival. But there are places where that lie begins to crack. Far from Terra's blinding spires, on ships that never see the Astronomicon's full light, sanctioned psykers learn the truth in fragments. They feel it in the way their instructors flinch when the warp grows restless. They hear it in the pauses, the words never spoken. And sometimes, when the Geller fields shudder just for a heartbeat, they see what waits for them if they fail. A sanctioned psyker lives on a razor's edge. Every breath is measured. Every thought is monitored. Runes are etched into flesh and bone, not for protection, but as reminders of obedience. Their training is not about mastering power. It is about learning how to suffer quietly. In the Schola Psychana, students are taught to visualize their own annihilation. They meditate on the moment their soul might be burned away to feed the throne. This is not cruelty. It is preparation. Those who cannot accept that end are deemed unstable. And unstable psykers do not live long. Yet even among the loyal, doubt grows like a hairline fracture in stone. There are records, sealed, redacted, half destroyed, of psykers who survived death. Not survival in body, but in awareness. During warp translation accidents, entire choirs have vanished. only for astropaths light years away to scream in recognition, claiming they heard familiar voices crying out from beyond time. The official explanation calls this psychic echo. The unofficial one is never written down. Because if souls can linger, then sacrifice is not release. In the depths of the warp, there are currents shaped by suffering. Entire regions formed from millennia of consumed Psyker souls, compressed into screaming tides of raw emotion. Some inquisitors believe these psychic scars are growing, that the constant burning of souls is changing the immaterial realm itself, making it more hostile, more predatory, a feedback loop of agony. This is the irony no imperial edict dares acknowledge. The very act meant to hold back the darkness may be feeding it. Nowhere is this contradiction clearer than among the Grey Knights. To them, Psykers are both weapon and warning. They fight demons not with ignorance, but with understanding. They know what waits beyond the veil because they have stood in its presence and returned. And they do not speak of mercy. During a purgation on a dead world whose name has been erased, a Grey Knight strike force uncovered something impossible. A Psyker soul bound to real space without a body. Not a demon, not a ghost. A human presence, coherent, terrified, anchored by sheer will. It spoke of the golden throne, of being consumed but not destroyed, of feeling itself stretched thin across a vast machine, screaming alongside thousands of others. The knights destroyed the anomaly without hesitation, but the memory of it followed them back to Titan. Elsewhere, the Inquisition tightens its internal surveillance. Radical factions whisper that the Emperor never intended this fate for Psykers, that the throne was a stopgap, a temporary measure that has become a perpetual furnace. They argue that humanity has mistaken endurance for victory. Others go further. They claim the Emperor knows that his silent agony is not just physical, but moral, that each soul fed to the throne adds another weight to his unending torment, and that one day that burden will break even a god. This belief is heresy. It is also spreading. On a forgotten frontier world, a rogue astropath choir makes a final transmission before their execution. It is not a warning. It is a confession. They claim they can see a shape forming in the warp, vast and luminous, composed not of demons, but of human anguish. A reflection of the Imperium itself, born from 10,000 years of psychic sacrifice. A god made of souls that were never allowed to die. The message is cut off mid-scream. Back on Terra, the black ships continue to arrive. The process does not slow. It accelerates. Psyker birth rates climb as the galaxy fractures. The cicatrix maledictum tears reality open, flooding entire sectors with warp energy. Children awaken screaming by the millions, and the throne demands more fuel. Among the latest arrivals is a young Psyker who does not cry. She does not resist. Her mind is calm in a way that unsettles her handlers. When tested, her psychic presence is vast, but muted, as if folded inward. She does not shine in the warp. She absorbs it. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor stirs. The movement is slight, barely measurable, but the custodes notice. The machines surrounding the throne register a fluctuation they cannot explain. The Astronomicon flickers, then stabilizes brighter than before. The Psyker is taken below, bypassing the usual protocols. What she sees in the throne room is not a god. It is a prison. Cables pierce desiccated flesh. Ancient mechanisms scream under impossible strain, and behind it all, a presence that feels vast, exhausted, and immeasurably sad. When her mind touches the Emperor's, she does not feel command, she feels apology. In that moment, she understands the truth the Imperium cannot face. The Psykers are not merely fuel, they are anchors. Their souls are holding something together, something already broken, and with every sacrifice the structure weakens. She opens her mouth to speak, and the warp answers first. Reality convulses, alarms wail. Somewhere far above, the Astronomicon flares violently, casting shadows across half the galaxy. For a fraction of a second, every Psyker in the Imperium feels the same sensation. A release, followed by terror. Because for the first time since the Horus heresy, something has changed. And whatever has been holding back the darkness may finally be failing. Silence follows the convulsion, not peace. Something heavier, as if the galaxy itself is holding its breath. Across 1,000 worlds, sanctioned Psykers collapse where they stand. Some weep without knowing why. Others laugh, hysterical, as if a pressure they never understood has briefly lifted. Astropaths clutch bleeding eyes, whispering that the light has changed. Not gone, distorted, like a star seen through water. On Terra, the throne room becomes a storm of motion. The custodians move with inhuman precision, sealing chambers, activating wards last used during the siege. Tech priests chant in rising panic as readings contradict sacred doctrine. The Astronomicon still burns, but it no longer feels constant. It pulses, breathes. Below it all, the young Psyker is screaming. Not in pain, in defiance. Her mind is no longer folded inward. It is opening, unfolding like a blade drawn from a sheath. The Emperor's presence presses against her, vast and fractured, and now she can feel the truth behind the apology she sensed before. He is not sorry for what must be done. He is sorry it has failed. For 10,000 years, the Golden Throne has not been a beacon alone. It has been a dam. The souls fed into it were not merely fuel, but mortar. Human consciousness used to seal a wound in reality, too vast for any single will, even his. Each sacrifice slowed the inevitable collapse by a fraction. Each one bought time, but time has run thin. In the warp, something shifts its attention. Demons recoil from the Astronomicon's flare, not in fear but in anticipation. The tides churn, rearranging themselves around a growing absence, a hollow where something immense once pressed outward. Ancient intelligences take notice, not with hunger, but curiosity. A lock is weakening, and whatever lies behind it is no longer fully restrained. The Psyker feels them looking. She feels everything now, the screaming choirs burned away in moments, the souls stretched across circuitry half aware, eternally dissolving. The Emperor did not lie to humanity, but he did not tell the whole truth. Not because he could not, because no one would have accepted it. The Imperium was never meant to survive like this. Her thoughts brush against his again, and this time the contact is clearer. The Emperor is not commanding her. He is asking, not for obedience, for choice. In a flash of impossible clarity, she understands what she represents. Not a replacement, not salvation, a transition. Her ability to absorb warp energy without flaring outward is not a mutation, it is an adaptation. Humanity changing under pressure it was never meant to endure. A new kind of Psyker, born not to burn, but to contain. If she is consumed by the throne, it will stabilize, for a time. Perhaps centuries. Another delay, another mountain of souls sacrificed quietly in the dark. If she refuses, the dam will crack. Across the Imperium, consequences begin to cascade. Navigators report stretches of void where the warp grows unnaturally calm, followed by regions of absolute madness where reality folds in on itself. Ships vanish without translation. Others arrive centuries too late or impossibly early. Entire star systems flicker, their existence uncertain, like memories struggling to stay coherent. On distant battlefields, chaos warbands hesitate, not retreating, listening. Something they worship is no longer where it should be. Within the Inquisition, sealed councils fracture. Radicals argue that this is proof. The throne must be allowed to fail, controlled collapse replacing endless stagnation. Puritans prepare exterminatus protocols for terror itself, convinced that whatever comes next will be worse than annihilation. And beneath the palace, the Psyker makes her decision. She does not pull away from the throne. She steps closer. The machines scream in protest as her presence interferes with systems never designed for consent. Psychic feedback lashes out, killing servitors instantly. Custodians brace as gravity itself seems to tilt. The Emperor's awareness tightens, alarmed now, not at her power but her intent. She reaches past the machinery, past the pain. She reaches for the souls. What she finds is not a unified mass, but a shattered choir, each fragment burning alone. And for the first time since their deaths, something changes. The screaming quiets, not because it ends, but because it is heard. She does not free them. She cannot. But she connects them. Threads form where there was only dissolution, weaving a fragile, trembling lattice of shared awareness. The throne's output spikes violently as the structure it relied on begins to rearrange itself. The Astronomicon flares brighter than ever recorded, then it fractures. Not extinguished, split. Multiple vectors of light radiate through the warp, unstable, overlapping. To navigators it is blinding. To demons it is confusing. The beacon humanity depended on is no longer singular, and in that multiplicity lies danger. Because a light divided can be followed, or hunted, the Psyker feels herself unraveling under the strain, not being consumed, but becoming something else, less individual, more vast. She realizes, with a cold clarity that borders on awe, that this was always the endpoint. Not endless sacrifice, but transformation. Humanity's psychic evolution forced into a crucible it barely understands. The Emperor's presence shifts again. Not apology now. Acceptance. Somewhere deep within the warp, the thing the throne was holding back stirs fully for the first time. It is not a god, not yet. It is a convergence, a pressure formed from every soul denied rest, every scream turned into structure. A mirror of the Imperium's will to endure at any cost. And mirrors, when they finally face you, do not flatter. As alarms echo across Terra and the Astronomicon's fractured light bleeds into the immaterial sea, one truth becomes unavoidable. The fate of Psyker souls was never just about survival. It was about postponing a reckoning. And now, that reckoning has learned how to look back. The fractured light spreads, not outward in a clean wave, but unevenly, like veins of lightning crawling through the immaterial dark. In some regions of the warp, the Astronomicon's divided glow overlaps, reinforcing itself into blinding brilliance. In others, it thins to a ghost of illumination, barely strong enough to be called guidance at all. To humanity, it feels like vertigo. To the warp, it feels like opportunity. On Terra, the palace trembles, not from impact, but from resonance. The Golden Throne is no longer merely consuming, it is interacting. Systems calibrated for one direction of flow now strain under reversal, feedback, recursion. The tech priests chant litanies that were never meant to be spoken together, their voices cracking as sacred equations lose coherence. The custodians stand unmoving, halberds grounded, eyes fixed on the throne. For the first time in their long vigil, uncertainty touches them, not fear, something colder, the knowledge that their purpose may soon demand a choice no order prepared them for. At the heart of it all, the Psyker drifts between states. Her sense of self is thinning, stretching across the lattice she has woven from broken souls. She can feel them now, not as fuel, not as fragments, but as presences. Millions of them, billions layered through time. Some are calm, others confused, many still in agony. But the agony is no longer solitary. That alone changes everything. The pressure is immense. Every moment she maintains the connection, the warp presses harder, testing the structure she has created. This is not an attack yet. It is examination. like fingers running along a crack in glass. She understands something then that chills her more than any demon ever could. The thing stirring in the warp is not reacting to the Astronomican's fracture as an enemy would. It is responding as a system reasserting balance. The Emperor feels it too. For the first time since he was bound to the throne, his will is not the sole axis around which this machinery turns. He is still vast, still powerful beyond comprehension. But now there is resistance, not defiance, not rebellion, but a counterforce born from humanity itself. A future he did not design. His awareness brushes hers again, heavier now, carrying urgency without words. He shows her flashes, not prophecy but probability. Paths branching, collapsing, overlapping. In most of them terror burns. In many, the warp floods real space so completely that distinction becomes meaningless. In a few, humanity survives, but not as it is. And in one narrow, trembling thread of possibility, the lattice holds. Barely. Across the galaxy, the consequences accelerate. A black ship emerges from the warp above a frontier system and does not slow. Its Jella field flickers, then stabilizes in a new configuration, warped but intact. Inside, the bound Psykers feel something impossible, quiet. The whispers that have haunted them since birth recede, replaced by a distant, shared awareness. Not control, not safety, connection. On a demon world, a ritual collapses as the warp recoils inward, devouring its own energies. Sorcerers scream as their patrons fall silent mid-incantation, not gone, drowned out by something louder, deeper, and unfamiliar. The Inquisition loses containment. Encrypted astropathic messages stutter through fractured light, arriving half-formed, overlapping with others never meant to meet. Secrets spill. Old heresies resurface with new context. Entire conclaves fracture as proof collides with dogma. Some inquisitors order immediate purges of Psyker populations. Others quietly countermand them, buying time they do not know how to use. Because time itself is behaving strangely. Moments stretch, then snap back. On some worlds, days pass in the space of hours. On others, a single night lasts long enough for civilizations to fall. The warp is no longer merely a medium, it is reacting to structural change, and structure demands resolution. The Psyker feels herself approaching a limit. The lattice trembles as more attention gathers around it. The pressure is no longer passive. It pushes back. Harder. Testing not just her will, but the cohesion of the souls she has bound together. Some of them begin to slip. Not fleeing, being pulled. She feels the first rupture like a scream, tearing sideways through her thoughts. A cluster of souls wrenched away, stretched into the immaterial tide, their brief unity shattered. The loss hits her like physical pain, but worse than pain is the realization that this will not stop. Not unless something changes. The Emperor's presence tightens, no longer distant, no longer patient. He knows this edge. He has stood on it before. 10,000 years ago, he chose stasis over transformation, certainty over risk. Humanity endured, but at the cost of endless suffering. Now the choice returns, but it is not his alone. Below the throne, alarms reach a pitch that can no longer rise. Systems begin to shut down, not failing but disengaging, as if rejecting parameters they were never meant to exceed. The Astronomican's fractured beams pulse erratically, threatening to collapse back into singularity or explode outward into chaos. The Psyker feels a truth settle into her with terrifying clarity. The lattice cannot exist alongside the throne as it is. One must yield. If the throne continues to burn souls, the structure she has formed will tear itself apart, feeding the very convergence rising in the warp. If the throne is starved, if the sacrifices stop, the light humanity depends on may fail long enough for the galaxy to drown. There is no clean outcome, only a choice between endings. She reaches for the Emperor one last time, not to ask, not to plead, but to show him what she sees. Not visions of doom, but the faces of the souls he has consumed. No accusation, just presence, just memory. For a fraction of a second that feels like eternity, the Emperor hesitates. And in that hesitation, something in the warp begins to move with intent. Not probing now, advancing. The pressure spikes violently, the lattice screams. Reality around Terra distorts, the air rippling as if submerged. Far above, ships lose orbit. The palace groans, ancient stones shedding dust like ash. The Psyker braces, every fragment of herself straining to hold what she has built together, truly knowing, that whatever happens next will redefine what it means to be human. And as the rising storm reaches its breaking point, the galaxy waits, suspended between breath and scream, for the moment when the balance finally tips. The advance is not a charge, it is a tide remembering how to rise. The warp does not explode into violence. It leans forward. Space around Terra stretches, bends, darkening at the edges like a pupil widening. The fractured beams of the Astronomicon stutter, their light trembling as if unsure whether to illuminate or flee. Every Psyker within 1,000 light-years feels the same crushing sensation, pressure behind the eyes, a weight on the soul, as if something vast has finally decided to stand up. Within the throne room, sound disappears, not silence, absence. The hum of machinery fades, alarms die mid-wail, even the air seems to forget how to move. The Psyker feels herself suspended in a moment, stretched impossibly thin, balanced between heartbeats. The lattice around her glows, not with light, but with presence. Countless human minds linked, aware, afraid, but together. And for the first time, the thing in the warp speaks. Not in words, in alignment. The pressure resolves into shape, not a form that can be seen, but one that can be understood. It is vast, yes, but not alien in the way demons are alien. It is structured, purposeful, a convergence of will built from unending sacrifice, from duty without end, from suffering endured because there was no other choice. It is what the Imperium has been becoming. A god, not of chaos, but of necessity. The Psyker understands then why it feels so familiar, why it does not hunger, but demands. This entity is not born of excess or desire. It is born of endurance, of billions of lives crushed into fuel and called salvation, of prayers whispered not for joy, but for survival one more day. It is the shadow of the Emperor's dream, and it wants to replace him. The realization hits like cold clarity. The warp is not breaking because the throne is failing. It is reorganizing because something new is ready to take its place. A god forged not by choice, but by repetition, by ritual, by acceptance. The lattice trembles as the convergence presses closer, not to destroy it, but to absorb it. To claim the bound souls and add them to itself, completing the pattern, ending the instability forever, ending humanity's uncertainty. The Emperor reacts, not with command, with resistance. His presence surges, vast and incandescent, a star flaring against collapse. The throne screams back to life as systems force output beyond safe limits. The Astronomicon blazes, its fractured beams snapping toward unity under sheer will. For a moment it feels as though history itself is snapping back into place, the old order reasserting dominance through raw force. The Psyker feels the cost immediately. Souls in the lattice begin to burn again. Not consumed, but strained, pulled between two impossible anchors. Their shared awareness fractures into agony as the Emperor's power surges through the same channels meant to free them. The lattice holds barely, but each second tears more at its cohesion. This is the price of control. The Psyker screams, not aloud, but through the lattice, through every soul bound to her. The sound echoes across the warp like a crack of thunder, a refusal that does not ask permission. She does not push against the Emperor, she lets go of herself. Identity dissolves. Fear burns away. The last fragile boundaries of individuality collapse as she becomes fully what she has been forming. Conduit, bridge, voice, not ruler, not martyr. A connection strong enough to carry truth without breaking. She shows the convergence what it truly is, not a savior, not a culmination, a prison made of good intentions. The pressure hesitates. For the first time, the advancing tide falters, its perfect alignment disrupted by self-recognition. The convergence feels the souls within the lattice not as fuel, but as people, aware, remembering, choosing. And that awareness destabilizes it more than any weapon could. Gods cannot be built from consentless suffering and remain whole once the suffering speaks. The Emperor feels it too. In that suspended moment, he understands the final failure of his design. Not that humanity relied on him, but that it never learned to carry itself. The throne was never meant to be eternal. The sacrifices were never meant to be routine. The light was meant to guide, not replace growth. He has held on too long. The Astronomicon flickers again, but this time, instead of fracturing, it dims. Across the galaxy, navigators cry out in panic as the familiar brilliance softens. Not extinguished, receding, like a hand slowly unclenching. Warp routes destabilize, then settle. Less precise, less absolute, more dangerous, more free. The Emperor withdraws his will by a fraction so small it would be meaningless anywhere else. Here, it changes everything. The throne's output drops. Not enough to kill him. Enough to stop the burn. For the first time in 10,000 years, no soul is consumed. The lattice stabilizes, glowing with a quiet, steady presence. The convergence recoils, not destroyed, not banished, but denied completion. It withdraws into the warp's depths, wounded not by force, but by incompleteness. The advance stops, the silence returns, but now it breathes. Systems in the throne room come back online one by one, their hum tentative, uncertain. The custodians lower their weapons, not in relief, but in stunned stillness. The tech priests whisper Binharic prayers that do not match any known litany, because nothing like this has ever been recorded. The Psyker begins to come apart, not violently, gently. Her awareness recedes from the lattice, threads loosening, identities returning to themselves. The souls do not scatter. They remain connected, faintly, like distant stars, still linked by gravity, not free, but no longer alone. She feels herself becoming small again, individual, human. As she slips back toward her body, exhaustion crashes over her like a wave. The Emperor's presence touches hers one last time, no longer vast, no longer overwhelming, just heavy with something that feels like gratitude or regret. She collapses. Above Terra, the warp calms, not stable, not safe, but quieter. The Astronomicon burns at reduced strength, its light softer, less domineering. Travel becomes harder, communication less certain. The Imperium feels the loss immediately, but beneath that fear, something else stirs. Across the galaxy, Psykers notice a change. The whispers are still there, but they are quieter, more distant. And sometimes when they reach out, they feel something answering back. Not command, not hunger, recognition. The storm has not passed. But for the first time, humanity is no longer pretending it never existed. And in the long, uncertain quiet after the near collapse of everything, the galaxy exhales, slowly, shakily, knowing that whatever comes next will not be sustained by sacrifice alone. The light has dimmed, but something else has begun to awaken. The galaxy does not heal, it adapts. In the days that follow, there is no grand proclamation from Terra, no revelation broadcast across the stars. The Imperium does what it has always done when confronted with truth too large to name. It continues, Ships still vanish in the warp, but fewer scream as they do. Astropathic messages arrive distorted, delayed, carrying echoes of other voices that were never there before. Navigators learn new instincts, tracing safer paths, not by brilliance alone, but by absence. Quiet regions where the warp feels less like a storm and more like a deep, restless ocean. The Astronomicon still burns, dimmer now, fallible, human, and that frightens the Imperium more than any enemy ever has. On Terra, the Golden Throne endures. The Emperor remains bound, sustained, alive in the way only he can be alive. But something has changed in the air around him. The machinery no longer screams constantly. The endless intake of souls slows to a trickle, each sacrifice measured, debated, resisted by factions that would have once obeyed without question. Not mercy, caution. The Psyker awakens days later in a chamber filled with quiet light. No restraints, no chanting, only watchful eyes and a presence that does not intrude unless invited. Her body is frail, scarred by forces it was never meant to channel, but her mind is intact. More than intact. She can still feel them. The lattice is faint now, distant, like a memory of warmth after a fire has burned down. But it is real. The souls remain aware of one another across impossible distances, a soft constellation threaded through the warp. Not a god, not a weapon, a reminder. The Emperor does not speak to her again. Perhaps he cannot, perhaps he chooses not to. Some truths do not need repeating, some lessons cannot be commanded into permanence. Elsewhere, across the Imperium, Psykers are still feared, still hunted, still bound and trained and sacrificed when necessity demands it. The machinery of survival does not stop turning because of one revelation, no matter how profound. But it hesitates now. In training halls and black ships, instructors notice something they cannot quantify. Fewer screams, fewer catastrophic failures. Psykers who once burned out in terror now endure longer, steadier, as if something unseen braces them when they falter. Connection, once forbidden, has become unavoidable. In the warp, the great convergence does not return. Not fully. Its pressure remains, distant and watchful, like a storm that has learned patience. It is incomplete, denied the final ingredient it needs to become inevitable. Choice. And that incompleteness changes everything. The Imperium will never call this a victory. There are no monuments carved for near catastrophes averted, no parades for endings postponed. History will record fluctuations, anomalies, unexplained survivals. Scholars will argue for centuries over whether the Astronomicon weakened or evolved. They will miss the point. What changed was not the light. It was the cost. The horrifying fate of Psyker souls was never just about death or damnation. It was about isolation, about being alone in the moment of dissolution, unseen, unheard, reduced to fuel and function. Now, even when they die, they do not vanish unnoticed. Somewhere in the warp, a fragment remembers them. And memory in a universe built on belief and emotion is not nothing. The Psyker stands one last time before a viewport overlooking Terra's endless sprawl. Billions of lives moving beneath polluted skies, unaware of how close everything came to ending, not in fire, but in certainty. She knows the Imperium will continue to demand sacrifice. She knows suffering has not been erased, but she also knows this. The future is no longer sealed by routine. It is uncertain again. And uncertainty, for humanity, has always been the space where hope hides. As the light of the Astronomicon fades slightly against the stars, another glow persists. Softer, scattered, impossible to chart. Not a beacon to follow blindly, but a presence that answers when reached for. The galaxy exhales into that quiet, and somewhere between survival and surrender, between godhood and humanity, a question lingers, unspoken, unresolved, and vital. If the cost of endurance is the loss of our souls, what exactly are we surviving for? And if we are finally heard, what will we choose to become next?